Well, good afternoon, folks. That was Keir Starmer resigning in front of number 10 Downing Street this morning. And one thing I'll say about the Brits, they have an excellent sense of humor. So somebody broke out a big, large speaker and started blaring Beethoven's Ode to Joy as Starmer was trying to give his speech. So they couldn't even let him go out, with a bit of dignity. So, anyway, today is Tuesday, June 22nd, and the worst kept secret in the UK is that Mr. Keir Starmer, Sir Keir Starmer, has announced his resignation after a pretty tumultuous 2 years. I wasn't going to do a video today because, this isn't really much news, but then I saw this article this morning in the Toronto Star, and it's the title kind of caught me. Keir Starmer, the victim of a revolution in British, quote, turnstile state. Now, basically, what the author is saying is, there's been a lot of different PMs in the last several years, and the author, Alan Woods, refers to this as a turnstile state. So I kind of like that term, and it piqued my interest a little bit. Now, what he doesn't go into, he talks about the UK premiership being a turnstile state, but doesn't really get into the reasons why that is. So I started digging into it a little bit. As we see here, Starmer is gone, and if you're like me, you've just given up on trying to count the number of UK premiers that we had, or prime ministers. So I whipped this together up in PowerPoint real quick. We are now on number 7 in the last 10 years. So we've had now from David Cameron, who was the last really stable UK prime ministership. And then, as you can see, it's been a comedy of errors ever since. So to have 7 prime ministers in 10 years, that's not good, because basically what that means is there's no continuity of agenda. There's no strategic planning if you're swapping out leaders every couple of years or whatever. So, we've gone from David Cameron to Keir Starmer, and now it looks like Andy Burnham will be looking for the next slot in there. But to have 7 prime ministers in 10 years, to me, it's just an indicator that, of bigger issues. And when you're constantly recycling your leaders like this, it just shows that the people really have no confidence in their leadership group. Now, keep in mind, Keir Starmer won a majority back in 2024, and less than 2 years later, he's getting bounced out on his ass. Now, you have to ask yourself why that's so. And, if anybody's been listening to me at all over the years, I've said 2 things about this stuff. First and foremost, as I said yesterday when I was chatting with with Coping in the open mic, I made it clear that, a person's standard of living, if you start messing with their standard of living, they start to do crazy stuff. and people start revolting, they start protesting, and all the stuff that you're seeing in the UK, particularly the last 10 years, I think is as a result. It's not that the leaders are just all incompetent. It's just that the people have no faith in their government anymore, regardless of party. And that's a problem because effectively, and I said this to anybody who'd listen to me as well, we're kind of in a period now in Western democracies, and every country is different. I think the UK is ahead of Canada or the United States or some other European countries with respect to how far along the decline cycle there. But the further you go along in the decline cycle, uh, the more chaotic you're going to see with the leadership. And by chaotic and declining, I mean economically, as people start to lose their standard of living, as inflation keeps rising, and as people can't afford as much as they used to, or as people can't, they can't support their children, they can't, have a vacation, all these things. What tends to happen is there are several cycles where you cycle through the existing parties. So, in the US, we don't like what the Democrats are doing, we'll vote Republican next. And then the Republicans get in. We don't like what the Republicans doing, now we'll vote for Democrat. And in Canada, it's, we don't like what the Conservatives do, and vote Liberal. Don't like what they're doing, vote Conservatives, and so on. And then in the UK, it's, we don't want what the Conservatives did, we'll vote Labour. We don't like what Labour's doing, so now we're looking at the Reform Party, which is new. And then you see it in Germany as well, the CDU and the SPD, and now with the new parties that are coming up, the AFD and the left wing party, I forget the name of them. What tends to happen is people will recycle through existing parties, and unless a new party is formed, like Reform, eventually they'll just cycle themselves out and they'll just quit voting because they'll say to themselves, well, they're all the same. They're the uniparty. And you're starting to hear that term a lot more in Western society, the uniparty, particularly amongst young people. I think a lot of people are getting disaffected by the whole notion of voting and democracy because they look at it and they just say, well, what's the point? I'm one of them, for example. Like, I voted in every single election, whether it be municipal, provincial, federal, from the time I was 18 when I could vote up until, recently within the last year or so, when I basically came to the decision, like, why am I even bother wasting my vote? Because whether I vote for one party or the other, I'm going to get the same results. And that's what's happening across a lot of Western societies now is people are just giving up. They look at these clowns. Like you got David Cameron, then Theresa May, Bojo. You talk about a clown. Then they brought in a head of lettuce. Then they brought in a dwarf, and now they've got Keir Starmer, whatever the hell he is. Um, so I think people in the UK, they're at their wits' end with their politicians, and they'll give it one more kick at the can and maybe bring in the Reform Party. But it looks to me like Nigel Farage and the Reform Party, they're just another globalist, their party under a different name. They're not going to get too far. And I think after they get voted in and people see that there's not much to them compared to the other parties, that's when you're going to see a real kind of chaos and anarchy happen. And same thing in Germany with the AFD, the rise of the AFD, and then in France with the rise of Marine Le Pen's party. People are sick and tired of the traditional parties, and they're going to vote for something new. That new it's going to be on a very short leash. And if they don't deliver on the needs of the people, um, they're going to get voted out, and maybe violently this time, because there's only so many times people can cycle themselves through an election and believing that their vote matters until, like me, they just give up. And once you give up, then your option is, okay, just let me know when the revolution starts, because all of these parties are co-opted. So, like I said, I think the UK is a little bit advanced. It's ahead of the other European nations in terms of what you're seeing here with all this turnover. But you look at France, Macron is a lame duck president, and the only reason he hasn't left is because he knows his party will get demolished in the next election. As I mentioned with the Germans, all the traditional parties, no one's voting for her. They're all at all-time lows. Merz is as popular as crotch rot. So I think the AFD will come in, and if they don't live up to the promises that they make to their people, they'll be bounced real quick. What ultimately ended up with Starmer, what ended him, was he came in with all sorts of promises to not cut social services and not raise defense spending, and at the end of the day, he did the complete about face, and people hate a liar. So he's on his way out. The UK is going to continue to decline economically, and hence we're going to see more of this chaos. Now, why is this important? Well, one of the other things I've always said is the country that has, I think, the most to lose in the West in terms of their living standards is Japan. And Japan has been a bit of an economic basket case now for about 30 years. They really have. And they haven't been growing as much economically as they were, say, in the 70s and 80s. And as a result of that, Japan is even, I think, further ahead than the UK is. So let's take a look at Japan. Now, I went back a little further. This is the last 25 years. So we've had 13 different prime ministers in Japan in the last 25 years. Um, that's, an average of what, 2.5 years per prime minister. The only one who really seemed to have a decent run, you've got Shinzo Abe here. He was elected twice, actually. He had an 8-year run, so of course he was too popular, so somebody assassinated him. And it's been, musical chairs ever since. When you have 13 prime ministers in 25 years, let's say, that's not a really good indicator that the people are really on board. It's also an indicator that whatever plans you do have for your nation, they don't seem to be working, because you keep recycling out leaders. Now, why is this important? Well, I think that history will show that this tends to happen when empires fail. Um, at the end of the empire, things get really chaotic. And that's when you see a lot of different leadership coming in and out. They're basically trying everything besides the obvious, which is listen to people, quit your warmongering. Like, people don't really ask for that much. All they ask for is, provide the social services that you say you're going to provide, whether it be healthcare, education, pensions, things like that. Provide funding for roads and whatever else that the federal government is responsible for in your particular country. Yes, provide some for defense and other social programs, and that's it, right? We don't ask much from our federal governments, but it seems to me that our respective federal governments are too concerned with things that are going on outside their borders, as opposed to being concerned with what's going on inside their borders. If Keir Starmer wanted to be in power, all he had to do was focus inwardly on all the things that are broken in the UK. Instead, he focused all of his time on Ukraine. So much so that he was never in the UK, to the point where he got the nickname Never Hear Keir. And you'll see that a lot with politicians too. They'll try to distract people with other things because tackling the big problems at home are too ginormous. Um, so, as an example, I went all the way back to ancient Rome, just, not that I'm comparing, well, I am comparing ancient Rome to today. Obviously things were different then than today, but my point, I think, is valid. Let's take a look. First 50 years of the Roman Empire. Now, this is after the Republic ended and it became imperial rule. First 50 years, we had two emperors, and we've all heard of Augustus. We've all heard of Tiberius, you know. So I think 50 years, as you see, Augustus there had a 40-year reign, Tiberius, whatever that math works out to. But they both ruled for a long time, is my point. Now, contrast that with the last 50 years of Roman rule before they broke out between the Eastern Empire and the West. The last 50 years of centralized rule, how many do they have? One, two, three, four, five, six. They had 8 different emperors in the last 50 years. And none of these, I think, are really well known, to be honest with you. So, and there's a reason for that. I think the last 50 years, now keep in mind, 50 years back then would have gone a lot more slowly than, or should I say, yeah, slowly than 50 years now. But to have 8 different emperors in the last 50 years, I think it just somewhat proves my point that as things in the Roman Empire were getting stretched out, and when everything was getting stretched thin, they just, people were complaining, people were upset, um, particularly outside of Rome in the regions. They started breaking away, and the Romans, either through recycling of emperors, assassinations, whatever, they ended up with 8 different emperors in that time. So um, that's a really, I think, where we're at. We're at a point in the West now where people are, you know, some people are still holding on to the ideals of democracy and the votes and everything. But I think increasingly more and more people are just realizing that, you know, our political systems are a joke, because all of these politicians, regardless of political party or political stripe, they're all beholden to the same elitist masters. They're all beholden to the same globalist plans, and they're not addressing the needs of the people in their individual countries. So, and there's only going to be so long that people will continue voting before they try to figure out a different way to affect change. And quite often in our history, that affecting change is the result of protests and riots and all that stuff. Because, I've always said this: if the politicians don't start listening to the people will make the politicians listen to them. And that's what you're seeing in the UK now. I was saying this on the open mic yesterday. I think that all the violence that's going on in the UK right now, like the immigration and the clashes amongst people and all that, it's a symptom of a bigger problem. And the bigger problem is, the standard of living in a lot of those regions outside of London have taken a nosedive, particularly in the last 20 years since the Great Recession. So, people are looking at whatever they can to lash out. You look at the Germans in the 1930s, there's a reason they voted Hitler in. They were economically depressed, and this guy was offering something different. It's not like they became a bunch of, crazy racists overnight or anything like that. So I think that's coming. I think that we are in an interesting point in history, one that the history books will certainly talk about. hundreds of years down the road as the empire kind of collapses and something new forms. And I think that Sir Keir and his kicking to the curb, shall we say, is, like I said, it's a symptom of that. They don't know what else to do, so throw another guy in there. Same thing with Rishi Sunak. They didn't know what to do, but they brought Starmer in. Rishi Sunak, he was a joke. He was only brought in because Liz Truss, the head of lettuce, she didn't know what she was doing. So people are just tired of the same old song. The old, it's the same old song with a different meaning since you've been gone. That's what it feels like. So I just want to throw that out there because I saw that headline and made me think a little bit. In other news, the only other thing that happened yesterday, after we left the open mic yesterday, I checked the news and it looked like the Iranians walked out of the initial negotiation meeting with the US because Donald Trump was, as usual, throwing out nasty tweets, threatening to bomb them and everything. So here, if you haven't seen it, is the moment that Arachi and the Iranian delegation walk out. And you look at the Prime Minister of Pakistan, his face looks like, oh my God, what is going on here? This is a disaster. So if you haven't seen this, I'll just throw it up real quick before I leave. There goes the Iranians. There's JD, wondering what the hell's going on. He comes over. What the hell's going on? Why do I look like a putz here? My dick in my hand? Where did the Iranians go? Oh, they took off. Because your president is a moron. And he violated the very first term of the MOU by threatening Iran. So, very embarrassing for JD Vance. Like, who would walk out on the vice president of the United States in a negotiation? The Iranians. That's exactly what they did. And good for them because they're holding firm to the terms of the MOU. And they're basically saying, no, we've got the advantage here. If your president is going to, talk smack to us, which is a violation of the MOU, you're not showing us respect, so we're going to leave. So apparently the Iranians did leave, and there are conflicting reports of whether or not how much work they did do. But what I can tell you is some reports say that they continued working through intermediaries. What I can tell you is this morning, one of the points that was a sticking point for them, which was the release of the sanctions, it looks like some of the sanctions money today has started flowing, like in terms of not so much sanctions, but the waivers, I mean, for shipping of oil. Looks like the Treasury Department has started removing some of those waivers. So what that indicates to me is that the Iranians came in yesterday and they were serious and they said, listen, you guys haven't addressed point number 1, number 4, number whatever points it is. We haven't seen any movement on the sanctions. We haven't seen any movement on the waivers. Israel's still, occupying Lebanon. All of these things need to be addressed before we sit down and talk to you guys about anything. And it looks like the U.S. took it pretty seriously, as they should. And I guess we'll see what the coming week will show. But I thought that was pretty interesting to see diplomacy at that level blow up in real time as it did. So anyway, those are the only two things I want to talk about is Sir Keir and how the pattern seems to be one that we should expect for a lot of Western nations, as we see in Japan and the UK. And yeah, it's going to be a heck of a week. Anyway, please like, share, and comment below. And as well, we're going to have our second open mic on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern. So if you're interested, please hit that notification button. And once I set up the live stream, you're more than welcome to join. We sit down, it's a good group. We talk about geopolitics, we talk about all sorts of stuff. We talk about social issues, history. It's a lot of fun. So if you'd like to join, please do so. Once we do the live stream on Sunday at 2 p.m., I'll drop a StreamYard link in the chat. And anybody who wants to join, feel free. And then we also have a Telegram group that people who join the Speakers Lounge, they gain access to the private group on Telegram too. And that's a cool group too, because we just trade information that we find on various things in the geopolitical world. So it's always good to learn new things, eh? So that's it for me. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Have a good one. Cheers.